Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and today we're going to East Jerusalem, where a decades-long dispute over several houses outside the Old City have become synonymous with the popular struggle against Israel. Coming into international focus in the weeks ahead of the 11-day Israel Hamas war last May, you've likely heard of Sheikh Jarrah in the context of the state of Israel allegedly pursuing an ethnic cleansing campaign in predominantly Arab East Jerusalem, especially as major networks like CBS, MSNBC, and CNN invited Sheikh Jarrah resident Mohammad El Kurd onto their programs, providing the activist an unfiltered and unchallenged podium with which he placed all blame on Israel.
Eviction does not capture doors being blown up, children being thrown from windows, the entire city being on lockdown by the Israeli military. So it's really important for us, even when discussing these topics, to ensure that we support the Palestinian experience, the Palestinian rhetoric of this experience, because we don't see these as evictions. We see these as, quite frankly, thefts. And we don't accept or normalize the Israeli courts.
In truth, however, the state of Israel is not involved really in the case at all. Rather, the pending evictions of some 70 residents of Sheikh Jarrah coming after owners of the properties in question filed claims against the renters who for decades have not paid rent. In any case, joining us to expand on this topic is founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman, attorney for the International Legal Forum, Russell Shalev, and finally, Israeli journalist, author, and attorney, Dror Yemini. Thank you all so much for being with us. Now, Russell, I'm actually going to start with you. Media and activists did a pretty good job of oversimplifying and taking the Sheikh Jarrah case seemingly out of context. Let's go back a little bit and look at what the case actually involves, who's involved, and who legally owns the land, and how was the ownership decided?
So in reality, right, the Sheikh Jarrah dispute is really just a run-of-the-mill property dispute between owners and renters who haven't, as you explained, haven't paid rent in decades. And it's very doubtful that if both of the parties would be Arab, that anybody in the world would be truly interested in this case. So the relevant property in the Sheikh Jarrah, Shimon Tzaddik neighborhood, contain a burial cave of a Jewish high priest Shimon Tzaddik from the Second Temple period. The land in question was purchased by two Jewish trusts at the end of the 1800s, and this property was registered under their name in the Ottoman land registry. There was a Jewish community in the area.
This is in the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in the Ottoman Empire, there's a Jewish community in the area through the British Mandate. Right, as you know, in 1948, Israel declared its independence. Jordan, along with other Arab countries, right, invaded the nascent state. The Jewish residents were driven out of the area. And what's relevant to note, so the Jordanian government sequestered, meaning it took control of the property, but it didn't transfer ownership title to anybody else. So it rented out the property to several Palestinian families. Right, it never transferred title ownership to these families, and through all the subsequent court cases within Israel, they were never able to demonstrate their ownership. So there's no real factual disagreement about their ownership. So right after Israel conquered, occupied, liberated, whatever you want, in 1967, the territory, Israel allowed a one-time release of properties that the Jordanian government held that came into Israeli control. The original owners of this property registered the property under their name. They originally wanted back in the 70s to evict the tenants. The Israeli court recognized the tenants as protected tenants, meaning that as long as they would continue to pay rent and abide by certain conditions, they couldn't be evicted. And they themselves signed an agreement, recognized the status, and after that, for the decades that ensued.
So the residents at the time actually agreed to those terms?
Yes.
Okay, so Dror, I want to turn to you now because you've written recently that there is no decent legal explanation for why Jews are trying to displace Arab families from their homes in the middle of traditionally Arab neighborhoods, or why Arab landowners in the city are prohibited from utilizing their rights. Assuming you're speaking of Sheikh Jarrah, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, can you explain your reasoning for this statement, especially within the context of what Russell just said?
I do agree with every word that Russell said. It's not the point. I mean, from the legal point, I know I read the rulings about it, and this is not the point. The point is something else. How can you explain to the public opinion in the world that Jews can regain their property in East Jerusalem, and Arabs from East Jerusalem who are citizens of Israel cannot have their property from West Jerusalem? I mean, it cannot be explained. It cannot be explained. That's one.
It can be explained very easily. Losing
I don't think
losing two wars of genocide has consequences for the losing side.
No, you know, Martin, you're quoting me. I know those justifications. Believe me, I wrote it again and again. But
so what's the logical conclusion? Losers lose, winners win.
Wait, let me finish my argument. That's one. I mean, we are facing a kind of situation when if only Jews can have their property in East Jerusalem and Arabs cannot have their property, we are doing something which is very stupid from our point of view. Now, wait, it's not all the story. And the second story is, I mean, what are we doing to ourselves? We, people who are looking for a Jewish and democratic state, what are we doing to ourselves? I mean, to settle in the middle of a highly populated Arab neighborhood. I mean, are we crazy? What are we doing to ourselves?
That reminds me of the whole of Israel. You can say the whole thing about the whole of Israel.
It's not. That's exactly what it's not.
Dror, Israel is a Jewish settlement. Israel is a Jewish settlement in a highly populated Arab area, stretching from the Maghreb to the Persian Gulf.
I mean, sorry, we have a state. We have sovereignty. We have.
You have a high court. Exactly, you have a state.
I'd like to interject actually because
you are trying. No, you're trying to compare something. I mean, 100 years ago.
Ben Dror, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question, please, because you're mentioning Arab claims being rejected in West Jerusalem or really elsewhere in Israel.
And rightly so.
But we have here, I have a report from Kohelet by author Avi Bell, which he writes that, ironically, had the Jordanian custodian of enemy property assigned title to the predecessors of the current Palestinian Arab holdovers, the lands that it had seized from Jewish owners, Israeli law would have been respected, would have respected that resulting title, which is the case in many of the residents in Sheikh Jarrah, is it not?
No, look, first of all, we are speaking about a highly populated Arab neighborhood. To settle inside, even if you have legal rights, and we have legal rights, all the courts in Israel actually confirm that Jews who are looking for their property, yes, they have the right. I mean, it's the ruling. I know what the ruling is. I'm asking only one question. Is it clever? I mean, if Jews have this kind of right of return to East Jerusalem, which is highly populated now, speaking after we have a state, and we have a state, don't forget it. I mean, we are not in the 20s and not in the 30s. We are now with a state. Actually, what we are doing is that we justify this crazy demand of the Palestinians for the right of return and restitution. Is it what we want? I mean,
so what are you saying? They can live there rent-free for the rest of their lives?
I want to add for the sake of accuracy, right? There is no blanket rule that Jews can reclaim property that they lost in 1948, nor is there any blanket rule that Arabs cannot reclaim property, right? On these specific homes in Sheikh Jarrah, right? We said in the 1970s there was a one-time allowal of property that had not been given to a third party for the original owners to reclaim it, right? The law is ethnically neutral. It doesn't mention Jews or Arabs. Meanwhile, for for Arabs, the Israeli absentee property law also allows former owners to ask for the return or to seek restitution for all Israeli citizens and residents. So as of at least by the 90s, tens of thousands of these cases have already been resolved.
In favor of Arabs
yes.
and individuals who identify as Palestinians as well.
Yes, certainly. But the wider issue of property left behind, right, by non-Israeli citizens and residents. So meaning Palestinians who are now living in other countries, right? That will be resolved along with the issue of Jewish property, right? First, Jewish property that was left in Judea and Samaria, and also Jewish property that was left in Arab countries, which is estimated to be at over $300 billion. That will be resolved in a final resolution of the conflict, and that's a regular practice of international law. It's nothing unique here particularly.
Let me say, look, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a political scientist. So all laws everywhere in the world are interpreted within a political context. Like the Arab activist was on before, said, I don't recognize the Israeli court. So his political context is that Israel's got no jurisdiction. Well, democratic governance isn't a recipe for suicide. I mean, what Israel's doing here is bending over backwards. In what other country do enemies have recourse to your court? I mean, basically, what part of they want to kill us are we having difficulty understanding? So these are enemy aliens who on the side who lost 2 genocidal wars in 48 and 67, because if the results of the war were reversed, can you imagine how much a role the law would have to play? Really?
Well, so Ben Dror, would you like to respond maybe to some of Martin's comments?
Yeah, of course. Let me just mention that something like 15 years ago, I was the first one who wrote an article about the Jewish Nakba. So it's nice that people say it now because I do support it. I mean, what do you mean? I initiated, in a way, the whole issue many years ago. And I dedicated in my book 2 chapters only to the question of property and Jewish Nakba and Jewish property and so on. Yes, I know all of it. I'm just asking myself, is it clever? Is it clever? I mean, from a wider point of view. I mean, what are we doing to also? Can we
back down on this?
I mean, I'm sorry. Can we? I mean, can it? That what we are doing can be justified? I mean, I don't know. If somebody can correct me. I mean, I don't know about any Arab that can reclaim his property in West Jerusalem. It doesn't happen. I mean, if I'm wrong, let me know about something of that kind. Now, we cannot. I mean, what we are doing right now is just to give justifications to the right, to this fantasy of right of return of the Palestinians. They do not have the right. Don't misunderstand me. Of course they do not. They wanted to exterminate us. Precisely. So they do not have the right. I don't. Yeah, I know it. I write about it.
I don't follow your logic.
But so no, because when we do it, when we reclaim our property in East Jerusalem, we give them justification.
No.
It cannot be just.
Why?
No, yes, that's exactly what we are doing. Now you are telling me. No. You know what? Let me tell you. Friends of Israel. Friends. I'm not speaking about the enemies. I'm not speaking about the anti-Israeli campaign. They cannot understand it.
Because you're not explaining it.
Russell?
I want to ask, right, when we're saying, right, Israel should do X or Israel shouldn't do Y, what does that actually mean, right? We have a private property dispute. Ultimately, it's a private property dispute.
In which the one side doesn't recognize arbiter.
But do we know of any other property disputes in which the government comes in and takes a side of doesn't allow?
Of course.
Once this has already reached levels of repeated litigation over decades.
Only
what-
against,
what-
only
let me
against
tell you-
Jews in the Jewish state.
Okay, so let me update you. I mean, in Europe, for example, we are speaking about 20 million people who were forced out of their homes because of population exchange, because of a lot of other things. They do not have the right. They do not have the right to reclaim their property. Mainly when we are speaking, for example, about Germans from the Sudetenland, for example. I mean, of course, they do not. They cannot claim the right, and that's why we have the right to tell Arabs, Palestinians, you do not have the right for property in Israel. Why? Because you attacked us. And just like in any other place, you do not have the right, as refugees, as whatever, you do not have the right in Israel. Now, but what we are doing now in Sheikh Jarrah, we supply them the justification.
Why?
I mean,
I don't
generally
follow your
speaking,
logic.
of
I do
course
not
we are.
follow your logic. What
Sorry,
you
so
said
does that mean you
said before,
pass a law that a Jew, for example, couldn't purchase a house in an Arab neighborhood? What exactly does this look
tell me,
like?
What are you saying? Can they live there? Can they live there rent-free for the rest of their life? Can they live there rent-free for the rest of their life? Why would you want to strip the Jewish owner of any rights in his property?
Okay.
Why? Because
I'll tell you.
because our public diplomacy is bad.
I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Let's zoom out. What is the difference between me and you? I think that we must be a Jewish and democratic state with a Jewish majority. Some of us support in the Great Israel, in a binational state, actually. Not me.
Not me either.
I'm a Zionist.
Not me
I'm
either.
supporting a Jewish and democratic state. I don't want to be a binational state.
Okay.
So what we are doing right now, what we are doing in Jerusalem, in other places, we are just hurting ourselves. We are damaging our good arguments, and we give them to the.
You lost me completely.
So I want to ask you, Bendel, because again, the law from 1970, the Administrative Arrangements Law, it preserves the property rights of anyone who received the property from the Jordanian custodianship, and all of those people are entirely Arab, and they benefited from this. Now, beyond that, you made the argument that Israel should take a moral stance in a sense and reject these evacuations because of public opinion. But, moral or immoral.
It's turning Israeli citizens
the point is that
into Class B citizens. You're turning Israeli citizens into Class B citizens.
But my point is that if Israel takes that stand and gets in the way, really, of a private court case, because that's really what you're saying, is that a private court case that was brought between private individuals should be intervened by on the side of the state.
It's a political decision. I mean, from the legal point of view, I know exactly that those people, private people, have the right. I know it. They have the right to reclaim their property. I'm speaking about the political point of view, and in the political and the global, and because of a lot of other reasons, we have to decide in the political level that we do not need this kind of trouble that only give justifications to the right of return and to the restitution demands of the Arabs. That's what I'm saying.
I have got no idea what the connection is between the two. So basically what you're saying is that Jewish citizens, because of the conflict with the Arabs, Jewish citizens become Class B citizens in the Jewish state because they can't reclaim their rights on property. That's what you're saying. I still don't understand. Should the Arabs
should be.
You see,
what I'm saying.
Look, we saw this.
There is a solution. There is a legal.
But we saw this Arab activist talking about children being thrown off the balcony. Really, the truth has only got a marginal role to play in the whole thing. What you have to do is stand up for your rights. You should. I agree with you that Israel presents its case very poorly. Most people don't know that it's a legal argument. They painted it with ethnic cleansing. Moving 60 or 70 or 80 people out is not really ethnic cleansing. And it's difficult to explain why there's ethnic cleansing in Israel when the Arab population has doubled since Israel was formed. Doubled comparatively to Jews, I mean. It's grown faster than the Jewish population. So I think if Israel wanted to win the public diplomacy battle. It could win it easily. The trouble is that, to win a battle, you have to participate. And Israel's decided to abdicate from the battle for the hearts of minds and people. The case has been presented really badly, that's all.
So first I want to add, if we want to win the PR war, then we need to accurately describe the situation.
Exactly.
And not give credence to the idea that there's a blanket rule for Jews to do X and a blanket rule for Arabs to do Y, which is not the situation, right? I want to add that there's a certain absurd situation that the Jordanian government in 1948 sequestered property that belonged to the enemy state of Israel. Israel took control of this property. They became part of the Israeli custodian of property, and it would be absurd to expect Israel to continue holding in Jordan's name a property that Jordan was holding from Israel until at some point there would be there would be a resolution. It would be a situation. I don't know of other such precedents.
No, once the facts are clear, the Arab case is absurd.
Well, all right. So, Dror, if you want to maybe give the final comments.
Yeah, no. There is a problem because in most arguments, yes, they are completely right. I mean, legal rights and so on. Yes, they are right. I know it. But actually, eventually, what we are doing is just harming Israel. We are harming ourselves. I don't want, from the very political point of view, a populated neighborhood with few Jews. It's not a way to build peace. It's not a way to build the United Jerusalem. It's not a way that we can justify ourselves in the world. Nobody in the world. I'm speaking about friends of Israel. I'm not speaking about BDS supporters. Nobody is going to buy our arguments in this case. We have to face it.
All right. I think, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have, but thank you all so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have this conversation. Russell Shalev, Dr. Martin Sherman, and Dror Yemini, thank you again so much. I'm Aaron Porras, and again, please tune in next time on Insider for more on everything Israel. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover next, let us know about it in the comment sections online. And finally, for more news from Israel, follow ILTV on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube at ILTV.tv channel. Thank you. Be well. We'll see you soon.